welcome back to episode number 3 of the Fantasy Cast here in season 2. He's Ty White. I'm Lachlan McTagg. As always, we're back with you. Big week in the NFL. Week 1. What a sight that was. Holy smokes.
What a sight. Football's back, baby.
Yes.
I don't feel good.
It all started with that glorious Thursday nighter. Bills-Rams. The Bills just laid a beat down in SoFi on primetime television. It was beautiful. I loved every second of that game. That was insane.
Beautiful is an understatement. You had two highlight reel plays by Josh Allen in the same game. One was a stiff arm on the sideline, which caught the attention of just about everybody.
That was nasty.
And the other was that leap into the end zone where he was like holding the ball out like Superman. And wow, what a way to start off the season. And It was a tremendous first week.
Yeah, I mean, aside from football, though, I mean, how's the last week been? Because I understand you've been a pretty busy man of late yourself, Ty.
I have been busy, man, Lachlan. It's been great, though, being downtown. I actually was fortunate enough I got to go home and watch the first slate of NFL Sunday games. But it's ramping up, schoolwork's piling up. I have lots of work starting tomorrow. I was just telling Locke before the show, I'm going to have to run back when I finish my work shift tomorrow to catch the Chargers-Chiefs on Thursday night. But yeah, I'm excited. And how are you doing in Arizona?
It's been pretty good. The football, it's been so strange because I've never had a football schedule like this. I woke up at like 9:45 on Sunday, and I'm like, oh crap! Like the 1 o'clock games start in 15 minutes because the 1 o'clock games are 10 a.m. Phoenix time, right? So I was like, oh wow! So I'm just like, casually just watching football at 10 a.m. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
And oh god, those 1 o'clock games were nuts.
Yeah.
The ending
of
those 1 o'clock games, they didn't want to end. I had the red zone feed going and the red zone host was going crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh man.
I love it. Was amazing to have red zone back. 7 hours of commercial free football. And like you said, literally every game was interesting to some effect. Like even Houston and the Colts and then in a tie. No team in the AFC South has a win, as we mentioned, at any points on the board. Crazy.
Yeah, that Houston game had no reason to be that interesting.
No. And to go into overtime too. You even look at Jacksonville and Washington. That came down to the end too. That was interesting. Pittsburgh, obviously Cincinnati would have been the game of the day. I mean, that was absolutely nuts.
Yeah, that had to be.
And a crazy ending. We're gonna get into that now. But even more crazy is our starts and sits from last week. It was kind of like each side was a bit of a polar opposite from each other.
Yeah, we got a lot of good and a lot of bad on this starts and sits list.
We'll give you the bad news first.
Yes.
We went technically, well, Rondell Moore versus Kansas City was one of our starts.
Yeah.
He was inactive, and we didn't know that at the time. He didn't actually play. In the future, we might look at potentially on the day of giving you guys a single replacement just on our Instagram, where we're most active. But as of right now, we didn't play. So technically, we went 0 for 4 on starts. That's the bad news. However, if you consider the fact that Julio Jones had 11.6 points and you round up to 12, that was a win. And I started him in my league, and I won as well. And wow, did he look good for Tampa Bay?
Yes, he looked
Brady was throwing
good.
his way quite a bit. Not to mention Dallas absolutely sucked. I mean, it's that time of year again. And that was great. What's the letter of the day? I think everybody knows. So it's too bad.
It was L.
Yeah. Well, Locke, we also had Isaiah McKenzie, who almost got 10 points, and he probably would have finished with around the 11 mark if he hadn't bobbled a catch and gotten an interception in the other player's hands.
Yeah, that was tough because Allen, that throw was a little bit low to begin with. McKenzie adjusted nicely, but he just couldn't corral it off his chest, and it just went right into the DB's hands. It was a little tough, but you know what? It is what it is. We'll start. I guess we told you to start Isaiah McKenzie. He got 9.9 points, and of course, our new threshold this year is 12. So he got below that, unfortunately.
However, not a terrible start in some, there's a lot of guys with a lot worse weeks than him. If you started Darnell Mooney or some of these other, if you had Allen Robinson playing, I feel so bad for you.
Yeah, I feel terrible.
We can get into that in a little bit, but better than quite a bit of the series in the NFL, and certainly someone who's looking up in weeks to come. I'll bang off the 2 losses, like absolute losses. Dameon Pierce did nothing against Indianapolis, about 5 points. Hunter Renfrow against the Chargers had about 5. He had a couple passes thrown his way. One of them was picked off. Didn't do much. Chargers defense looked good, so I'm very happy about that. And then obviously we just talked about Julio, who I said it was a fantasy cash, almost guaranteed that he caught a touchdown. Was he close? Yes. Do I think he's going to be great in that offense? Yes. Did he have a good week? Absolutely, he had a good week. You round out to 12. Technically, that's a win for us.
Yeah.
It's our freaking show. It's not your show. It's a win.
It is what it is. It is what it is. I mean, yeah. It kind of it hurt a little bit to see Julio doing so well in the color red too, because at least when he was with Tennessee, he was in new colors and that. But
and they sucked, and he didn't play.
Yeah, to see him back in the NFC South too, I'm like, oh god, he used to rule that division for years, and now he's back with friggin' Brady.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the return to Atlanta game. I mean, that should be pretty special. Hopefully he stays healthy. He's doing really well. So technically 0 for 4, but more like 1 for 4 because Julio did have almost 12 points if you round up. But oh my goodness, Lachlan, this was a highlight of my fantasy week, apart from me winning in both leagues and the Chargers winning, was that we went 5 for 5 with our sits. That's never happened before. I don't think that's ever happened before. That's the first time we went perfect for sits.
I believe so as well. I think we went, I feel like we went perfect with starts last year. I think we went 4 for 4 with starts one week.
Yeah. We were certainly we're accustomed to getting around the 3 to 4 right.
Yeah. But this especially for week 1, this was good. So I'll start it off. Your boy Ramondre. We told you to say Ramondre Stevenson. And you'll know
how right were we? I'm
very, very correct. He put up a cool 4.7 points this week. So you were spot on with that prediction, Ty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're not a big fan of him here at the Fantasy Cast. I mean, sure, I respect him as a person and a player. I just don't really want him on my fantasy team. Ramondre, you were in the toilet this week, buddy. What happened? I love it. And next was and Lachlan, this is also impressive because we had quite a few big names.
Yeah, we did. These next 4, Ramondre Stevenson isn't that much of a name, but these next 4 are pretty, I guess, decent players week in, week out for their teams that we were calling for you to sit.
Absolutely. Starting with, or I guess second now, is Adam Thielen versus Green Bay at home. His partner had about 40 points, but he himself had 6. And we were right about that. We mentioned how in the previous year, last episode we mentioned in the previous year, he had a slow 2 first weeks in the NFL and bad fantasy outcomes. And that was more of the same this week. He got 6 points, didn't do well at all. Lachlan, who we got next?
Yeah. And I might I add with Adam Thielen, that was a very good win by the Vikings. And usually when the Vikings win in that kind of fashion, Thielen gets involved, and for him not to be involved is a little bit unusual. Yeah. But I mean, when Jefferson looks like that, I mean, you don't have to throw Adam Thielen's way a whole lot. No. Next guy we told you to sit was Dolphins running back Chase Edmonds. And the Dolphins had a pretty good game on both sides of the ball. But Chase Edmonds only put up 10.5 points. So again, not a bad start if you started him, but also if you sat him, you're not kicking yourself. You weren't missing out on a whole lot with that 10.5 points there for Edmonds.
Yeah, absolutely. And the threshold was 12, as we discussed last week with running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And he was below 12. So like Loch said, maybe not, he's not a horrible, you're not kicking yourself at the point.
Absolutely. So not by any means.
Yeah, but mediocre performance, but he did catch some balls at the backfield, obviously a strength of his. Next, TJ Hawkinson versus Philadelphia, obviously one of the better players at the tight end position in the National Football League. He had 7.8 points, and this was a team that I'm pretty sure they put up 35 points or something like that. They put up upward of 30 in a tough loss to Philadelphia. However, TJ wasn't a huge part of that. Like we said, he was a great blocking tight end, great player, maybe not the best fantasy player sometimes. And last week showed it, and we were 100% right. way below that 12-point threshold. The next player, though, was close to the 15-point threshold, but didn't quite get it. Who's that?
It's Jags QB Trevor Lawrence. And again, Ty mentioned our quarterback threshold is 15 points. Trevor Lawrence put up 13.4. This is another one. If you had Lawrence in your lineup, not bad, not great. And again, if you sat him, you weren't missing out on much, depending on who your quarterback was. But yeah, so 5 for 5 in the sit category, 0-4 in the start.
Oh, I like how
so 5 for 9 overall. 5 for 9 overall. Not bad, not great. We can improve.
Absolutely, we can improve. Well, that's what the season's for, is getting better each week here at the Fantasy Cast. But wow, flaming hot start for the sits, which I absolutely love. And once again, the fact that there were some big names in there. And I know a couple people who started some of these guys to listen to Fantasy Cast. There you go. We're moving on to big weeks. We did this last year quite a bit.
Yeah.
We're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to breeze through the names, but highlight a few players who stood out and maybe shouldn't have been on this top 5 list. We're going to start with quarterbacks. Just go back and forth here. The biggest name, of course, other than Josh Allen, mentioned on Thursday night, Patrick Mahomes. Nothing has changed with Tyreek Hill being out. I saw this great clip on Colin Cowherd. I have to give him some credit. He said, just because he left the team, Kansas City's offense is not going to score as fast, but they will score a lot and just wear down teams. He had 34 points at Arizona.
Yeah, another guy I want to highlight on this list as well. I mean, to round out the list, you have, Josh Allen at 2, got Jalen Hurts and Herbert. So not an unusual list, but the one guy that really stands out was Carson Wentz. Boy, did he look good in his Commanders debut.
Yes.
27 for 41, 313, 4 TDs. He did have 2 interceptions, but he did put up a cool 27.7 points in his debut. Yeah. We'll talk about him a bit later, but that's just one guy on that list that I think stood out for me, and I think you would agree as well.
Absolutely. Someone who no one thought would be there. Carson went on a new team. Didn't look too bad, though. Not at all. Going on to running backs now. Oh, my goodness. Someone who was injured quite a bit is back, ladies and gentlemen, and hopefully he doesn't get injured anymore. Saquon Barkley had 33 points at Tennessee. Wow. I know fellow Fantasy Cast man Christian Haggett, full part-timer Christian Haggett, had this man on his team, and he's been waiting for a big output for years, Lawson. He's had him for years, and I think it put a smile on the face of every NFL fan and fantasy owner this week. Yeah,
for sure. Even obviously not if you're playing against Saquon, because you're like, oh God, this again. Here we go. But I mean, it's just great for the game when you see a guy like Saquon have a big week like that. Again, 164 rushing yards, TD, 6 receptions too. The 6 receptions helped him quite a bit to get over that 30-point threshold. And another guy, Falcons guy, Cordero. I know you have him. Cordero has not missed a beat with this Falcons offense. I heard a lot of people saying in the offseason that Cordero Patterson is going to take a step back because there's no way. Last season was a one-off. Had a lot of garbage time receptions and stuff like that. I don't know. I think he's still going to be a unicorn in that offense, regardless of who's there right now.
That was a statement performance. He shut up people who were talking about him like that. He had a career high for rushing yards. I think it was 122 was a final total. A couple passes, a touchdown. He had a all-around complete game, not just as a wide receiver, but actually as a running back. I'm pretty sure he had 22 rushing attempts. Ridiculous.
He had 120 rushing yards to go along with 3 receptions for 16 yards. He scored a rushing touchdown as well. So he was mainly taking reps at running back, but then also catching some passes out of the backfield as well. So he really can prove again that he can do it all for the Falcons, which is very key in that offense. Started
him in both teams. That was so nice to see. Just to quickly name the other 3 running backs, Jonathan Taylor, of course, 27 at Houston. DeAndre Swift versus Philly. Good to see he's back and healthy. 26 points there. Kareem Hunt. Wow. Overtook Nick Chubb. He had a very nice week versus Carolina. Baker didn't get that win playing his whole team.
Okay. He did just about everything he could, though. I think Baker played all right.
No, we didn't play horribly, but yeah. What you gonna do? Okay. Why don't you start us with the wide receivers here?
Yeah, wide receivers. I'll just go down this list quick because this list is like pretty standard.
Yeah.
So I mean, at the 5, Michael Pittman. We love him so much. We love Michael Pittman.
And Loch talked about him so much last year where he said he's gonna be this guy's gonna be top dog, and they're absolutely right.
4, Jamar Chase, 28.9 points. What a week he had. Him and Joe Burrow are just phenomenal together. Didn't really miss a beat. That was a tough loss though.
He got a touchdown with no time remaining. No time remaining. From Joe Shiesty, who threw 4 picks, by the way. I don't mind saying that.
I started Joe Shiesty last week,
okay.
and he still managed to put up, I think, 19 points, which was miraculous. Miraculous, because I was when I was watching that, or the first part of that game when he was continually turning the ball over, I'm like, oh god, they're gonna bench him. Yeah. It's like, I'm gonna have a quarterback who's gonna put up less than 8 points. Like, this is not good. But anyway, he recovered. 3, Devontae Adams. Holy, did he look good? He is not. It doesn't matter where you put him, man. Like, he's just gonna perform, and he's just gonna continue to prove time and time again that he is one of, if not the top dog in the league, receiving wise. And that you're gonna have to do a lot to catch him. I mean, you can make an argument for obviously Jetta and Cooper Kupp, but I don't know. Those 3 guys are in the mix. And speaking of Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp, they're at number 2 and number 1. Cooper Kupp put up a nice 31.8 points, 13 receptions. Wow, was he targeted a lot by Matthew Stafford?
Yeah. You know who wasn't? Allen Robinson.
Yep. Yeah. That was shocking.
Yeah, that was
shocking.
Shocking there, and I almost guarantee that's going to change moving forward.
It has to.
You have to look at that in the film.
Allen Robinson's a good enough receiver to produce for a team. Like, there's no chance he gets used like that. And number 1, Ty, take it away.
Well, it's Justin Jefferson. Simple as that. 40 points, 39.4. My goodness. I mean, he looks so good against Green Bay. That's honestly, I think Devontae Adams just still, because of respect and stuff, edges him out. But he's the number 2 receiver in the NFL. I mean, it really is. And wow, he was impressive. If you have him on your fantasy team, you probably had a pretty good week, unless you started Allen Robinson or Ramondre Stevenson. Okay, we're going to tight ends. I'm going to breeze through these. Who's number 1? It's obvious. It's Travis Kelce with 26 points. He was the only player in the tight end position who had over 20 points. The rest were, and brace yourself because you're going to hear some names that you don't usually hear when you talk about fantasy football or football in general. O.J. Howard, who was the old he was with the Bills, and he was also with the Buccaneers. That's what it was. He's with the Buccaneers too. He's on Houston now, and he had 17 points. 2 of those, he had 3 receptions, 2 of which were touchdowns, I'm pretty sure, against Indianapolis. Good for 17. Taysom Hill out of Atlanta, the quarterback / running back / wide receiver / tight end. 15. Yeah,
this has a big asterisk on it because he also had 81 rushing yards. But he's technically listed as a tight end.
Yeah.
So you know what? It's week 1. Let's throw him in there. Why not?
He's a utility player. And yeah,
exactly.
It was nice though. Gerald Everett, Chargers. Let's go. Big touchdown. Nice touchdown. He caught the ball at least 5 yards short of the end zone with a guy draped all over him, and he kind of just stumbled back and fell in. He had a good debut for the Chargers, 14 points. And Will Disley.
Who?
The Seahawks tight end versus Denver. He caught a touchdown. That was the majority of his points. He 13.3, and or a big share of his points, I should say. Wow. Just briefly, crazy game. Geno Smith hasn't looked that good since he played at West Virginia. I mean, I loved it. I love to see Broncos country. Let's hide. Or left wide, or What was the coach doing? Like, you literally paid $240 million for this quarterback, and you're not going to put the ball in his hands at the end of the game to a guy who never made a field goal over 60 yards in his career. I don't think. I found it hilarious too, because I was watching that Monday night game, and one of my friends down the hall from me here, he's a big Seahawks fan. Oh, nice.
So I remember this distinctly. It was I think it was their second to last drive when the Seahawks made that big red zone stand. The Broncos had the ball on the 2, and I was like, all right, you're Russell Wilson here. You got the ball on the 2. Do you hand it to Javonte Williams? I was like, no, I think you throw this ball. And he looks at me, he's like, don't ever say that to me again. Because obviously, we know what happened last time. We know what happened last time Russell Wilson threw the ball on the 2.
Absolutely. Some legendary interviews came out of that game too. Obviously the Geno Smith one, they wrote me off, but I didn't write back. And then Shelby Harris, who's the defensive lineman, had an emotional interview talking about how, Seattle traded a D lineman to that team. And of course, Russell Wilson. And he had some rather strong words. I recommend checking that out. It's pretty funny too. But yeah, and the tight ends with Disley. We're kickers, Cade York, Suckup, Boswell, Joseph, all had between the 13-16 range, but who's the main one here? I'll leave this to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's Young Wei Koo. That guy was brilliant yet again. Unfortunately missed the last one from, what was it, like 60, 68 yards?
I think it was something like that, and it would have been. It was
something absurd that he had to make. It was online. It was just didn't have enough leg. Fair enough. But yeah, again, I mean, the Young Wei Koo is an ideal kicker for me because the Falcons get down the field efficiently, but then they just don't really convert in the red zone too often.
That's why he's
Young Wei Koo went 4 for 5 from field goals, and that just racks up your points so fast. And along with when the Falcons score touchdowns too, I mean, he knocks those extra points through like it's nothing.
Yeah.
There's a reason why he was one of, if not the best fantasy option for kickers last year. Mm-hmm. But other than that, the kickers can take the week off because it was a rough week for the kickers.
Except for Cootie's like Joseph had a good week, but all these people that we mentioned. But yeah, like Evan McPherson. Talk about that guy. And I like him because he played at Florida, and I like the Gators, but my goodness, to miss an extra point to win the game. And then I think it was blocked by Minka Fitzpatrick, and then he missed 1 or 2 in overtime as well. The Steelers, Boswell missed 1 or 2 as well.
Yeah.
And then
neither kicker wanted to make a field goal or an extra point to end that game, which was just made it more entertaining. Quickly, D and special teams. The Chargers defense had a sneaky little 3 interceptions. The Bucs defense again looked good. Bills defense looked really good again. Haven't missed a beat there. The Dolphins, 19 points. They had an interception and a touchdown. So that helps.
Yeah.
And so did the Steelers. The Steelers were turning the ball over against Joe Shiesty so much.
4 picks, and that'll do it.
4 picks and a forced fumble. Yeah, that's a pretty good week for the Steelers. They put up 22 on the defensive end. That's it for big weeks.
Yeah. Exciting games.
What are we doing next? We're going to the waiver wire. For the first time in season 2, we're heading to the waiver wire.
Yeah.
And we got a couple of Commander players on this waiver wire. Ty, you want to take it away with our Commanders players?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I'll do one. You can do the other one. We'll start off with a rookie. We'll start off with Jahan Dotson. He looked pretty good. I actually originally drafted him and then I let him go. But he had a good week. He had a pretty good week. He had 18 points, 2 touchdowns, receiving touchdowns, and that was on 3 targets, I'm pretty sure. So if you're looking at it from a consistency standpoint, it's not fantastic to have a player who's touchdown reliant. But he had a good week, promising week for a rookie. He looked pretty good with Carson Wentz. So he's our first Commander wide receiver on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and I mean, you might be saying, well, if you're going to a second Commander wideout, isn't that a bit worrisome? And I wouldn't think so. They're playing Detroit this week. Then I think Curtis Samuel, another guy, is a guy you should look at on the waiver wire as well, because I think he's in line for another big week against the Lions. Week 1 against Jacksonville, he had 11 targets that game, 8 receptions, 55 yards, a touchdown, 19.2 points. Pretty solid debut this season for Kurt Samuel, and I think expect more of the same, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, you love to see it. I mean, you love to see someone who gets 11 targets.
Yes.
on a team that
That
has
volume,
Jerry
yeah.
McLaurin and Logan Thomas and now Jahan Dotson. So that was great. Our last one, interesting one, and this is an important one, I think, for the main reason that running backs are a scarce position in fantasy football. We have Dontrell Hilliard. You might be wondering to yourself, who is that? Well, let's tell you. He's a running back for Tennessee. He's the number 2 to Derrick Henry. He had 21 fantasy points last week, 2 of which were touchdowns. But the stat that I really like that stood out to me, he was on the field for 88% of third down snaps, the most important down in football, obviously. And that's someone obviously who can come up the backfield and catch stuff and, dump offs people, even if it doesn't get the first down. He catches a ball, it's 1 fantasy point. Just like that in PPR leagues. So we like Hilliard, we like Dotson, and we also like Curtis Samuel. Those are our 3 waiver wire pickups for this week. We hope you heed our advice, and I think these players are looking up, Lachlan. Especially, say if Derrick Henry goes down, Hilliard pops right in there.
Yeah, knock on wood that doesn't happen, obviously. But Hilliard, I mean, anytime you have a backup getting more than 15 points, that's something to look that's something to look for, at least. I mean,
absolutely, very
deserves a look to pick up on your team, regardless of how good of a week you had prior, right? I mean, that's kind of obvious. Starts and sits. First start. A guy I loved last week against the Saints. It's Drake London.
Yes.
Drake London did not have a touchdown last week.
No.
But he did put up a nice 12.4 points.
Beautiful.
He didn't do a whole lot in the red zone, which is fine. It's fine. Cordero Patterson did his work. Other guys produced, but Drake London was just consistent last game. He was a consistent target for Marcus Mariota, who, by the way, looked pretty darn good.
Is Mariota back? They were beating the Saints for the majority of the game.
Yeah.
Which sorry to bring that up, but if you figure out those little kinks towards the end of the game, Atlanta will win more. Drake London will be one of the reasons. Next, so obviously he's at the Rams this week. Now we have Jamal Williams, not Javonte Williams, versus Washington. Jamal Williams had 16 points last week, 2 rushing touchdowns against Detroit. Washington, obviously not a phenomenal team, probably a bit better than Detroit, or defensively, at least on paper. But Jamal Williams, I think, is a good option, and he's probably going to get a touchdown to this game. And more importantly, we think that he's a player, if you're struggling to decide who to start running back, he's someone who can definitely break the 12-point threshold on any given week in the NFL.
Yep.
And we like him this week versus Washington, especially having 16 last week.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Next one, we're going with a quarterback here. We told you we talk about him a bit later. We're telling you to start Carson Wentz this week against the Lions. We have a lot riding on this Lions Commanders game this week. I just realized that we have a lot of stock put into this game for this week, which is interesting. But it could either play out really, really nicely or really horribly for us. So we're willing to take that risk any week. We're gonna tell you to play Carson Wentz because he did look very good. Obviously, coming off that 27-point performance. And I didn't really understand the Colts' rationality for wanting to trade him because I don't think he was that bad last season. No, I get it from the Eagles' perspective because they drafted Jalen Hurts. Yeah. And I mean, from the Eagles' perspective, Carson Wentz was always their guy. He just struggled, and then Nick Foles just won them a Super Bowl, and then his days were kind of numbered in Philly once they drafted Hurts. But again, I think the Commanders got a very good quarterback in Wentz, and I truly believe in this guy this season. But
season quarterback with weapons. That's the most important thing.
Exactly.
He has the weapons, and they're also facing Detroit, who got 40 bombed last week on defense.
Yep.
And not to say that they're a bad team. I like Detroit. Obviously, we love Coach Dan Campbell. But yeah, Carson Wentz versus Detroit. Next, my goodness, we got a Charger for the first time on the start this week. I love it. Joshua Palmer at Kansas City. If you haven't heard, Keenan Allen is almost 100% out due to a hamstring injury. Last week in Vegas, he didn't do much at all. I think he had 5 fantasy points, then he got taken out. Sorry, he was doing quite a bit and having a good game until he got taken out. He's probably on pace for between 15, 20, but Palmer is someone who can easily fill that role. He had a bunch of touchdowns, I think about 5 touchdowns last year. He had some good games. He's a more reliable receiver for the Chargers, good hands, physical guy. Justin Herbert can put the ball in almost anyone's hands. We saw DeAndre Carter last week, who is so irrelevant that that the folks at CBS put up an image of some random white guy who caught the touchdown as their like after thing graphic. And DeAndre Carter is actually black, and you couldn't see that because he had sleeves on, and you couldn't really tell. So when I saw that they threw up a white guy, I was like, oh, who the hell is that?
Yeah, that's not DeAndre Carter. What?
yeah. Carter had a good week though, and we think that Palmer's one of those people that can definitely fill that role. And it's the Thursday nighter. Today actually is when you're seeing this video at Kansas City.
And finally, we're telling you to start Darrell Henderson Jr. against the Falcons. Falcons D struggled down the stretch, to say the least, against the Saints last week. And here's something we haven't talked about yet. Where was Cam Akers?
It's on the person's list.
Where was Cam Akers against Buffalo? They didn't give him the ball for whatever reason. And the reason is still unknown. I don't know. Maybe that's why I don't coach in the NFL. But anyway, we're telling you to start Darrell Henderson because it appears that he is the lead back for the Rams. And I know the Rams had a bit of a troubling start to the season last year, but you know what? It doesn't matter how good of a team you have. The Super Bowl hangover is so real. It's not even funny. Yeah, it's so real.
Yeah.
And I know everyone was trying to say that, oh, this Rams team is different. Well, okay. Think about some of those Brady Patriot teams that had the Super Bowl hangover the next season. Like, it happens to every single team.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be a big bounce back week for them. Poor Falcons running into it. But Rams Henderson, team that's going to bounce back. But you know what? Henderson appears to be the lead back, and I think he's going to get some more touches within that offense. And again, Sean McVay's a genius. So there's that. So I think for all those reasons, you should definitely think about starting Darrell Henderson Jr. against the Falcons this week.
Absolutely. Should get a bunch of targets at the backfield. Very important PPR leagues. We're going on to our 5-6 now. I want to go through them fairly quickly. The first one's Robert Woods at Buffalo. He only had 2 targets last week, which is very concerning. However, not to say that he's going to have 2 points again. He's probably going to have between the 8 and 10 point range, less than 12 nonetheless. And that's why we think you should sit him. And yeah, Robert Woods, number 1 sit.
Yeah. Next one, Justin Fields, Sunday night prime time against Green Bay in Lambeau. This is a prime game where the defense for Green Bay is just going to take over, I think. And there's an opportunity for Green Bay to really get to Fields. And, you know, I mean, obviously they played in that monsoon at Soldier Field last week.
Which is the only reason they won, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much the only reason they won.
Yeah.
Normal conditions, I don't think they had any chance in that game.
Yeah, because I know Debo dropped a couple passes that could have turned into a lot of yards. But yeah, we're telling you to sit Justin Fields this week. We think the conditions are just too primed at Lambeau for the Green Bay defense just to have a field day, no pun intended. So yeah.
I like that. That's pretty good.
I didn't even mean to do that either.
Yeah, okay.
Oh no.
No, that was I like that, man. That was pretty good. Okay. Now going on to our next one. This is the biggest hot take we have so far on this list. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who had a good week last week. He had 2 touchdowns last week versus Arizona. But they're not playing Arizona this week. They're playing Chargers. And I was as a Chargers fan, I was legitimately shocked that our defense won us the game last week. Because they did. Khalil Mack, strip sack fumble, won us the game on 4th down. Chargers have a much better defense this year, especially in the running game. Sebastian Joseph Day up the middle. I mean, they got some guys who can clog up the lane and do well, take away short yardage stuff as well. They were pretty good at that. And, you know, the Chiefs, they love running, especially when they get in the run zone. They love running those just dump underhand passes from Mahomes. The Chargers last year, remember, we had a play against the Steelers where we stopped that. We're familiar with that type of play, and they look for those sorts of things. So I think Clyde, although he might not have a horrible week, I don't think he's going to eclipse that 12-point threshold, and therefore he's a sit against the Chargers this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough call for sure. That'll be a bold pick. And I have Clyde on my team, and I'm going to have to make some decisions along with J.K. Dobbins. So it's going to be a tough little stretch here before that Thursday. And of course, they play the Thursday nighters. You got to make up your mind really fast.
Yeah.
Next one, we're telling you to sit Kadarius Toney. Really wasn't impressive at all in that opener against Tennessee, despite walking out of there stealing that game. For a while, they had no business winning that game, and they walk out of there with a 1-point win in Nashville. Like, that's crazy. They're playing the Panthers this week, and I just expect more of this. I just don't think he's going to do too much. I think the offense is going to roll through Saquon. And yeah.
He didn't have a single target last week, only 2 rushing attempts, which is unlike some.
Very, very concerning.
For a first rounder, I mean, that's a little concerning. Sure, he'll be better, but for right now, he's a sit. Our last one, another pretty big name, Miles Sanders, who had a decent week last week. Very good week, actually, against Detroit. But they're playing Minnesota on Monday Night Football. It's a big game, and Loch and I were talking about this. We love Minnesota this year. Minnesota looks very good.
Yeah, they look good.
Offensively, of course, they look good. Defensively, though, was something that stood out against Green Bay. Zadarius Smith, who went over to from Green Bay to Minnesota. He had a fantastic game. Minnesota's getting a lot better. They're very underrated defensively. Someone who can take Miles Sanders out of the equation and definitely have him less than 12 points is certainly a big possibility. On a big game, I really think Minnesota's going to take this one quite convincingly in the end. So those are our 5 starts and sits. Just a recap of the sits: Woods, Toney, Fields, Sanders, and Clyde. And our starts: Drake London, Jamal Williams, Carson Wentz, Josh Palmer, and Darrell Henderson.
Yeah, and quickly, just to cap off the starts and sits here, we told you last week we were going to throw a defense in there, maybe for you to either this could be a mix of a waiver wire / a start, because I know for me at least, and I think Ty, you would agree, defenses are really week to week. Yep. Like if I'm going to pick up and drop one, I guess, player or roster spot on my team every week, it's going to be a defense.
Yeah.
So this week, I think Denver's defense is one to look out for, not only in the waiver wire, but to start as well. Denver's playing Houston. And I think that's going to be a big bounce back for Denver. I think this is the game they finally get their legs under them. You know, they're not in prime time. They're playing Houston. They can go out there. They can try things. They can do whatever they want. I think they're going to walk all over the Texans next week. And I think their defense is going to be a big part of that, because even against Seattle, their defense, they didn't have a bad game by any means.
No, not at all.
No.
And they should have won that game. Denver should have won that game. 2 goal line touches, should have been lights out, game over. 2 goal line fumbles, sorry. And yeah, like you said, it's Houston, whose offense is getting better. Davis Mills, OJ Howard, Pierce, Brandon Cooks, of course. But yeah, it's a great pick, Loch. Denver, they still got a good team. Simple as that. Bradley Chubb. We're going on to the fantasy question of the week. Feels good to do that actually when football's on and not preseason. So what's it this week, Lachlan? What we got?
So our question of the week: who will be the rookie of fantasy football this year? Last year, this is again very arbitrary, but I think we both agree that Jalen Waddle was absolutely in that conversation.
Yeah.
For the rookie in fantasy football. And Ty, who do you think this year's rookie will be to watch out for?
There's a lot of studs this year, a lot of good players, but the one that stood out to me most, and I'll tell you why, is you're gonna love this. It's Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. He's actually someone who I did draft this year. I feel like he was gonna have a good year, and he's gotten off to a fantastic start. Why do I like him over someone compared to like Jahan Dotson, let's say? Well, it's because of consistency. Jahan Dotson, 2 of his receptions were for touchdowns, and those were the majority of his points. Touchdown reliant. Drake London, touchdowns will come. Doesn't have to worry about that. He's got the most difficult part of the game down pat so far, and that's getting involved in the offense down regular stretches of plays. He had 7 targets, 5 receptions and 74 yards, which as a rookie receiver who's technically number 2 or 3 on the depth chart right now, definitely bumps him up. Someone who Marcus Mariota can rely on, and someone who just looked good. Consistency is a huge part of football. And if you can get 5 receptions and 74 yards without a touchdown for over 12 fantasy points, when those touchdowns start coming in, people will look at him very differently. So he is a fantastic player, and I think personally he's going to be the rookie of the fantasy football year. I don't know about the actual NFL season, but probably in the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously we've only played one game in this NFL season. It's kind of tough to create an outlook for what the next 16 weeks hold. Another guy to watch out for is Garrett Wilson again. I mean, he had a phenomenal year at Ohio State. He's in a similar situation to Drake London, where he just kind of walks right in through the front door of that offense and immediately is set up well in a great situation. Because again, Drake London, they drafted him in the first round last year for a reason, to come in and make an impact right away. Not dissimilar to what happened with Calvin Ridley a few years back as well. When they drafted him, he kind of walked right into that offense, immediately was that number 2 and had a phenomenal rookie season.
Yes.
I draw a lot of similarities there between Drake London and what Calvin Ridley did in his rookie year in Atlanta as well.
That's a great point. And something actually I didn't even mention, if you look at, say, compare London to Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson played Detroit. Drake London played what's supposed to be one of the premier defenses in the NFL in the New Orleans Saints. They were ranked number 2 or number 3 in fantasy, they were within the top 5 to 7 range of defenses that you should play in fantasy football. And Drake London had a great week against them. Looking for much more from him. But as far as that goes, that's the end of this is episode 3 of the Fantasy Cast for season 2. It was a good episode, and this was our first in-depth episode. And it was great. And from here on forth, we're going to start trying to have guests or weekly guests. Next week, you might see Lachlan. They might see the full part-timer.
Maybe.
He might make a return. Christian Hagen.
Might.
But it was a great week.
If we can get a hold of he's a busy man nowadays. We got to be able to get a hold of him first.
Yeah. And you got to send him his paycheck to come back. Thank you so much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Please follow us on our Instagram at the Fantasy Cast, of course, for all our clips and reels and stuff from the show. And we'll keep you updated. Set those Thursday lineups. It's Thursday. Yes. Chargers Chiefs tonight. We hope you have a great week of football. For Lachlan, I'm Ty. Ladies and gentlemen, see you next week.
Go Sun Devils.
There we go.